So hey, what is up guys? It's Prabdeep here and today I'm going to show you how I painted this landscape painting right here. Now this painting is quite similar to the one that I did a few months back, and it was another kind of a snowy landscape including a road in it and leading the path somewhere high up in the mountains. Now the reference image that I used for this painting was actually just right next to the one that I painted a few months back. For this video, I'm going to show you the process that I usually follow when I try to go in such kind of paintings. So let's get started. So I first start my painting by marking out my composition. Now I do this with a mixture of burnt sienna and a little bit of burnt umber and a lot of turpentine. I want a really thin mixture so that it can easily flow on the canvas panel that I have. And then I try to mark out the main lines that I have in my painting. For example, right now it is these mountains in the distance that are in my background, and then there is the sky, and then I have a road running right in my foreground. Now I also try to mark out the basic things like where the clouds would be and also where the trees are, because these are the most important things that you have in a landscape painting. So when you're happy with all of this, when you are done with what you really want in your painting, I guess that should be enough for your underpainting. I guess you can really go on, and there is just not a really defined limit with where you want to keep going with the underpainting. Now if you're satisfied with it, if you are just confident enough that you will be able to continue to paint without any problems, then that is, I think, where you should stop. Now the colors that I'm using for this particular painting are the titanium white, ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, burnt umber, some of the Prussian blue, cobalt blue, and then I have this one, the yellows here, the Indian yellow, cadmium yellow, and some lemon yellow. Now I also use some green, but I often like to mix my own. But here I'm actually using the sap green, and then at the end I have the magenta. So the brand of oil paint that I'm currently using right now is the Camel or the Camlin. Now it's a famous brand, and I'm currently using a mix of both the artist grade and the student grade oil paint. Now I had a lot of student grade colors left over and I really wanted to use them out, so I'm currently using them for this one. But most of our main colors like the burnt sienna and burnt umber or ultramarine blue and titanium white are mainly artist grade. Now this is where I begin my blocking stage. Now at this point I'm currently focused on mixing out the main colors that I have in my background. Currently I first try to paint out the sky and the mountains that I have in my background. So I mix in the ultramarine blue with a lot of titanium white, so I get a really nice light colored mixture. Now with that I also use some of the Prussian blue and cobalt blue so that I could get the shade of the sky right. Now most of these colors are also similar with the background mountains too, because generally they are of this bluish shade. So currently you can see me painting out the background sky in my painting. Now I'm at this point not really that much focused on painting anything in detail. I'm only worried about getting the things right in the masses. Now next I proceed towards the mountains in the background, and currently I'm using a little bit more ultramarine blue in the sky mixture and a little bit of the Prussian blue to get the things right. You can also add a little bit of magenta if you want to be it on the reddish side. Now the medium that I'm currently using is actually a leaner medium that I made it myself, and this medium was actually a mixture of stand oil with the turpentine. Now to get a lean mixture out of it, I would often mix a lot more turpentine in my mixture than the stand oil, because stand oil is pretty thick, and the mixture that I go for usually is the ratio of 3:1, where there are 3 parts of turpentine to 1 part of the stand oil. So once I'm done with my background things, I just move on to my foreground, where as you can see right here I have in the painting the road And the road is actually of the similar colors as of the mountain, because roads are generally of the darker shades, similar to the trees that you have in the painting. Trees also tend to have a much darker value than all of their surroundings. So currently at this stage of the painting, you can see that the region of the mountains that I have here is both under shadow and some of it is also lit by the sun. Now this is because it was a mountainous terrain, and because of the high mountains there would be some areas which would not get the light. Now since this was the time of winters, what you will see is that the region of light is also not really that green. It's much of the dried out leaves that are there on the trees, and because of the harsh conditions it's also not really that vibrant. Now what you will see here in my foreground is that there on the road is a lot of snow. Now this is because this was a point where you really can't go further, because on the road there was too much snow and the road was further blocked. Now to paint snow, I actually make a mixture of ultramarine blue and titanium white. Now I wouldn't want to go with the pure titanium white here, because obviously if it becomes too white it would look fake. Now for this particular painting there was a bluish tinge to the snow, so I used the ultramarine blue, but this generally won't be the case. You have to look at it according to your scene, and then you generally would want to tone down the paint's value a little. So what you generally would want is a little bit of the darker value than the pure white you have. Now once I am done with my blocking stage, I would move on to the detailing process. And this is thus far the longest stage that I have in the painting, because here I would look for the different things and the different minute details that I have, and I just try to be as accurate as possible in matching their values, their vibrance, saturation and everything. So the brushes that I use for my painting are actually the flat brushes mostly. But what's really important is that you take good care of them, because if you don't, they can really go bad very quickly. Believe me, I've wasted a lot of paint brushes. So right now I would try to fill out all the remaining area that I have and just get the values and everything right. As you can see me right now, I'm trying to paint the other values that I have, the midtones which are currently in the background, and the foreground too. Now what you will always see here is that I also try to mix in my lighter values that I have previously used the darker values for. So as you can see right now in the painting, I first blocked in the snow with a darker value, and I'm currently mixing a lighter value for the snow here. Now this is because I usually fix my first values to be darker, because this really helps me in the blocking stage, and then I further move on to the lighter values for the highlights. Now this is a pretty nice process because it lets you paint the things which are often more difficult if you just try to tackle it right away. And not only for the snow, I try to do this for all the other things that I have in my painting. So if you see a lot of values for if you really want to block in the painting, just try to use a neutral value which would not be too dark and would not be too bright. So for this, you just go for that. Now currently what you can see at this stage of painting, you can see me marking out the lighter values of all the blocked in parts, and here you can obviously see me doing it in the snow in the foreground, then the sunlit part of the mountains, and then also in the sky. There's also some of the snow also in the background mountains, so you can see me that I'm currently trying to make it as right as possible. There are some regions where just snow just gets accumulated. So now I would just go back and forth into different parts of the painting. Now I would also like to paint in the trees at this moment, because trees, as you already know, is an important part of a landscape painting, so you would always want to paint them right. Now instead of going directly at the tree shapes that you might have learned, you might want to go for the tree shapes that are under the shadow and then which are under the light. You see, you might want to paint the whole shape as you are seeing it right now. What I mean here is that I would often make a mistake of painting the trees that I had a way of painting, but I wouldn't really paint the tree that was actually right out there in the scene. So as you can now see that I'm painting the tree that I have, the only two major trees that I have in my painting. These are the ones which were the dried out ones, and they really didn't had a lot of leaves. Now I also have these two trees right in the right side of the painting, and these were the deodar trees, and these were still green and they really looked beautiful. Now some part of these trees was sunlit, so I paint that part here with a mixture of cadmium yellow with some sap green. Now I would also like to neutralize the green here because it might get too vibrant, and I do that by adding a little bit of its complementary color, which is the magenta. You'll really want to keep all of the saturations of different parts of the painting under right balance, because if something goes really vibrant out there, it would really look odd. So as I proceed with the painting, I just generally decrease the size of my brush, and right now I currently would be using a number 2 or number 3 flat brush. Now for the finer details, I also use some dagger brushes and also the number 0 and number 1 round brushes. Now this is the point where I start the highlights. Now this is the final process of the painting, and this is actually one of the most important ones, because something goes wrong here, or if you overdo the highlights, everything just looks very messy. And since now we are using the oil paints, so making a correction would be a bit difficult if they aren't dried at all. Now here I save my lightest values for this part, because highlights are generally the lightest parts of your painting, and for this I just try to save the colors which are the most pure. Like for the highlights of the clouds and the snow, which is sunlit, I would actually use pure titanium white out of the tube. I might also mix in some other paint if the value might differ from the actual white, but generally here I would use the colors straight out of the tube because I want the colors to be as bright as possible. Now you need to be really careful here because it's really easy for you to overdo the highlights, and if the highlights just get really too much, everything just looks very bad. So that's it. Now you just keep going back and forth and just decide for yourself that is your painting finished or is there anything left for you to do. Now if there is, just go for it, and if you think that it looks fine, you're satisfied with it, I think you're done with the painting. So thank you guys for watching this video. This is the way I usually go with my paintings, trying to show you how I go around them. So if you guys enjoyed it, just go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And if you have any questions, you can just comment down below. I would be very happy to answer them. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys in the next show. Bye.